everyone know, if they're here for the first time, that our meetings are strictly 1 hour. And I will adhere to that. So let's all be respectful of each other's time. We're all volunteers and we want to make sure that we don't impact everyone's evening more than necessary. So we will have a hard stop at 7 o'clock. So everyone has a copy of the agenda. I'm officially calling the meeting to order. Delene, did anyone email you from the public in terms of guest comments?
Nope, I have no emails.
Okay, so we're going to move to agenda item 3 and the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on May 25th.
We do have somebody from the public with their digital hand raised.
Okay. Can you tell us who that is, please?
It's an Audrey.
Okay, I think unless Audrey submitted information in an email to Delene 3 hours before the meeting that she's unable to speak, is that correct?
Oh. Audrey, to be fair, Eric, Audrey did send an email to me at 2:26.
3 hours is 3 hours. You have 3 minutes, Audrey.
Ha 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 ha.
Audrey?
You're on mute, perhaps?
Oh,
We can't hear you.
I'm unmuted. Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly how to do public comments exactly. This is not my forte. But I do want to thank the Tree Advisory Committee for looking at the Oak Hills Park Eversource situation. As you know, in January, they took down a stand of Norway spruces there. So as chair of the Nature Committee there, I'm keen to see some stewardship practices implemented by Eversource. And I hope that the Tree Advisory Committee will look to see that a mix of native trees, shrubs, and pollinator flowering plants are something that's suitable for the habitat at Oak Hills Park is implemented by Eversource. I hope they didn't just take the trees down and then want to stick a few things in there that are just decorative. So I want to thank the Tree Advisory Committee for keeping their eye on Eversource and depending on what their plans are for guidance on true stewardship going forward. So thanks for taking my comment.
Absolutely. And I think an agenda item further down, Audrey, is addressing some of what's going on at Oak Hill so that we can let everybody know just what we're doing or what we're trying to do in terms of working with Eversource. So
Great, thank you.
Okay, so do we have someone moving to approve the minutes from the May 25th meeting? Did anyone have anything that they wanted amended?
I so approve, and I think the minutes were very good.
I agree, the minutes were great. They accurately reflected what we discussed on the 25th. Is there a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. All right, Paul, Capital Tree Planting Program, what do you have for us?
Okay, I just wanted to update everybody on what had been done for the final count of trees for the spring of 21. We planted it was 26 trees ended up being planted. And then for the fiscal year, it ended up being 82 total for the fiscal year. And in addition to that, the next item is some thank you letters. We received a thank you letter from Susan Anderson, basically saying that Paul and Alan, because Alan had referred her to us We did get our red maple tree on June 14th. It looks great. The men did a very professional job and were very pleasant. It would be wonderful to put on the list for next year for another tree also. Well, as it turns out, they got that tree also because we had somebody down in First Street that after we had ordered a tree that they said that they had wanted, once it got there and was about to be put in the ground, they said that they didn't want it after all. So as it turns out, we were able to take the tree that was supposed to go on First Street and put the second one in for the people down at 21 Merrimack. Then we also had another person over at 4 Baxter Drive, Claire, Vermont, said thank you in capital letters so very much. And I thank the city of Norwalk as well for this wonderful program. So, and she had about 6 O's after, grateful. It makes a huge difference in our front yard and the guys were great.
Nice, nice. It's always very gratifying to have somebody recognize, the work that we do. And they always say, if you have one person right, it's reflective of many other people who didn't actually take the time to, in this case, send an email. So thanks for sharing that with us, Paul. When you said that 26 were planted, is that included in the 82? So it's an 82 total?
For the fiscal year. So
for
we had
fiscal year? Okay,
56 in the fall and
okay.
we had 26 in the spring for the total fiscal year from July 1st. It put us at 82 trees,
That's
just for the tree
fantastic.
advisory committee.
Yep, nope, that's fantastic. Great, thank you. Okay, Paul, you're still up. Anything with the capital tree budget in terms of balances that we need to know about?
Okay, we had some money left over and we will have that in addition to the money that we've gotten as of July 1st. It was approved by the council members. So thank you, George and Lisa, who are in attendance for that. We've gotten $65,000 as of July 1st. So we'll have about 74,000 plus or minus. All of the bills haven't come in yet, but based on the calculations of what we've ordered and what the bills should be, it'll leave us about 74,000 for next fiscal year.
We'll put it to good use.
It's a part of it's already spent.
That's great. And you know what? I mean, you bring up a good point, Paul. It's really wonderful to have people like George and Lisa here to see, how we actually use some of the money that they approve on the other end, and how we work together to get as many trees in the ground as we can. Okay, development for fall 2021, spring planting locations. Where are we looking at?
Okay, I have a couple of other locations now that are finally, once some of the trees went in on First Street, it's contagious because some of the people now that didn't want them said they might want them in the fall. So we have a few of the trees there. And then we've got a list of a couple of other ones that customer service has turned over to us from telephone calls that they've received. So we have about 10 of them so far, roughly, to go in the ground at various locations around the city. And then we can start now to build that list between now and the beginning of September, mid-September, before we issue all the orders for the next section.
Okay. In terms of some additional planting locations, Cindy, Paul, Rich, and I had worked with Darlene Young, and we had submitted a grant for a housing area in Sono. We did not get that grant, unfortunately, but we are still targeting that area. So in terms of future tree planting locations, I think we're going to still see that property on there. It does fit the criteria for street trees and canopy trees. So we're going to move forward with that. Obviously, we're not going to do the tree plantings on the interior as we were going to do with the grants, but we can certainly continue to do canopy street lining trees with our TAC budget. So I will speak with Darlene Sonia and the people involved separately, and then report back at our next meeting on July 27th with those details. Yeah, Lisa, sure.
Just to make a comment on that, as I think you all know, we talked about this at the tree summit, or the planning meeting for the training summit, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Louise Washer and I were able to get about $50,000 worth of grants, and we're targeting that area already. So if there are some ideas that you'd really like to place trees in, we are kind of looking for some places to put these trees, and we could certainly work with. We submitted a proposal to Ken and Anthony, which I think Louise is working with through that with them now. But if there's a couple spots that we can be helpful with these funds, we'd be happy to talk to you about it.
That would be great. We were looking at a very specific location. The address is escaping me right now. It is adjacent to the train station, so it's not throughout Sono. We were targeting a particular area. We would love to be able to work with you guys or get additional funds to maybe complete that project as we envisioned it, having not gotten this Arbor Day grant.
Yeah, because what we think is that we may well get this $20,000 from the Nature Conservancy every year. So if the $20,000 that we've already talked to Ken and Anthony about where we want to target that doesn't come through this year, that's certainly something we could target for next year. So chat with us about it. We're excited about.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thank you.
That'll work out great because we can use the tree advisory committee, public works money for the outer perimeter street trees, and then anything on the inside, because it is an area in the inner city. And it was Townhouse Gardens in Madison and Monroe.
Thank you, Madison and Monroe. Right. And it is sorely lacking in treescaping,
Yes.
Around the perimeter and on the inside. And, by the ball field and just all of the interior areas. But that would be something for us to look forward to. Thank you. Any other location, Paul, that you wanted to?
Not yet, not yet,
Okay.
but
No, that's fine.
one of the reasons that we wanted this on the agenda is basically for people to start looking again and getting the information that they had from any of the liaisons that they're in contact with in the neighborhoods that you have. Start sending them in so we can put the list together and have it ready for the fall.
Great. I think Rich wanted to add something.
We had previously had Aiken Street on the list from some public feedback, and I had met with Ken Hughes out there during the construction in the spring. And I think the field at the West Rock School is pretty close to completed. And that makes a good location now to target for either this fall or following spring.
They had some trees in the project, and then what we would do in addition to that would definitely be a good combination to continue and add more trees to that area, definitely.
So that location is a perfect example of some place where the city had to do some construction. Some trees had to be removed in the process, and as a committee, we got together and determined how many trees we would try to put back into that area to create a barrier from, like, I think the parking lot and some of the residents was the issue. Yeah.
That's correct.
Great. Okay, so moving along, agenda item number 7. Paul, did you get a maintenance schedule from Olmsted?
Yes, I did. I was going
Okay.
to see if I could do a quick share screen with everybody too and just kind of run down that item. And everybody see this?
Yeah,
Okay, this is what Olmsted submitted to me, and they've got some trees back from the 19s that they didn't have to do anything yet. But as we go through, we saw some in the fall of last and summer of last year that they were doing under warranty. There's some now over on the area Leonard down in that area that they haven't done anything else because they didn't need to at that point. Some other ones that were put in, and then we've got a whole group down here that they just put in back in May that they're starting to do the maintenance on, and they've already watered, and you can see how they did them on the 22nd of May and the 19th of June, And they did that all through. They checked and they noted on there that there were gator bags. The homeowner watered the one over at 122 Partrick. There were gator bags on other ones. And you can see how they've given me that information. So they've given me what they've been asked to do for this particular month. And they'll continue to do that throughout the summer.
Are they're watering Belden as well, Paul? I'm sorry, I was. Belden Street?
Belden, they didn't do anything yet this year, but they are supposed to be, those are all still under warranty, so. Because they were planted in November of 2020, so there's a 2-year warranty on those.
Right, because the bags are not on them anymore, so.
Yeah, I'll mention that to them.
How long have those trees been in the ground on Belden?
11/21/2020.
They look good. I mean, they're holding their own.
And,
That's
and
good.
so what's our recommendation? We want to keep gator bags on for 2 years? Is that?
It's up to them in the contract. They can either keep them on or water them directly. They have the choice, but they're ultimately responsible for the trees to last 2 years. And as Peter said, they look pretty good so far. That combined with what we've gotten for rain, they haven't done anything else at this point.
But we're running in July and August and it gets tough.
They're gonna have to make sure that they take care of them, so I'll mention that to them.
Yeah, their roots are still, fairly bound in those pits, so
Mhm, mhm.
they need water.
Yeah.
Okay,
Paul?
I'll mention, yep,
There's a dead little leaf linden on Gregory. I don't think it's under contract. It looked like a fairly mature tree. It's probably been in there. It's one that I had assigned, so it's probably at least 3 years old. But it's just dead on the snow shelf. It should be removed. And
all right.
and we should
You know,
consider,
If you want to shoot me the address, I'll have
I
them
will.
take care of it.
I'll send you the address with a photo.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Andrew.
Any other questions on that? All right,
Well, how often does Olmsted provide a report to you?
monthly. They're required to give this to me every month.
Okay.
Paul, what's your assessment on the trees at Fodor Farm, the oaks? They look like they're finally coming around.
Yes, Gary said, give him time with those and the fertilizer and everything else, the treatments that he did. He said, give them time and they would probably be okay. And it does look like they're coming around.
I noticed one to the east that we didn't put in is dead in that proximity. It's not, it's a street tree, but it's not one of the Fodor Farm oak trees.
Okay. All right, then we'll take a look at it. I'll talk with Chris and Jose and then we'll have somebody take a look at that if it's
Yeah.
a dead tree.
I don't think we need to replace it, that's your decision.
Okay, but the other two are looking pretty good.
Yeah.
From the looks of it so far.
Yeah, so I'm pleasantly surprised and kudos to Gary.
Yeah, that's why when they ask like that, I have to kind of give them the time to prove themselves, put them on notice. If the trees die, they are going to replace them at their cost. But if they're asking me for time, sometimes I give them a little time with it so that the tree can get every shot and every chance to thrive. And if it doesn't, then they have to do it. And in this case, he was right. Give him time and it worked.
Yeah, I think I'll send a note to Gary on my own.
Now they'd appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. All right, so all of us over the last month had some input. We all sent emails to Paul for the tree planting list for the RFP. And one of the things that I sent over was a list that some colleagues at the Audubon Society really highly recommend as not only native species, but native species that support both insect and bird pollinators. So we can kind of get, the biggest bang for our buck with some of those. And so I sent that list over to Paul. And as far as I know, Paul, you were able to add a bunch of those.
Yeah, I
Actually,
added
to
everything
choose
in
from?
that you had asked me to. And some of the ones that were on there were already in there, and I can share the screen if you want me to with that spreadsheet.
Well, it's remarkable to how robust the native list is. And my question is, we have to get prices and find out how available those trees are, correct? If we're going to really use those trees.
That is correct. Can everybody see the list?
Yes.
Everything in yellow that is what Erica asked me to add that came from the Autobahn that she was talking about. So I got that. And then we also have the shrubs too.
We tend not to do plant shrubs. That's more of a,
Well, once in a while, they do come in
Recreation and
handy.
Parks does that a lot.
Yeah,
Shrubs.
for the most part, that is correct. We don't do them for street trees because we're usually looking to put street trees in. But in a certain situations, there's some down at 21 First Street where because of the building, because of the overhead wires and everything else, we just couldn't get anything in there. So rather than do nothing at all, we were able to put a couple of small shrubs in there.
Right.
Right, and so, so you bring up a really good point. While the list is a robust list and it does look great, Paul's gonna do some legwork and find out pricing and just how available or readily available these trees are and in the caliper size that we look to plant before they, you know, kind of solidify themselves on this list. I mean, certainly if something is cost prohibitive, it's not going to be something that we want to look to put in at least too often. So, Paul, how long do you think it would take you to work on that?
Well, what I need to do now with this list is basically I've already asked purchasing and been in touch with them and they've put together the RFP and it's ready to go out on the street, except for this final list. They've got the smaller list, but now everything in yellow has been added to it. So as soon as we get this, if this is what we want to go with, we'll put it in the RFP. And right now, just to give you a number, there's 46 native and 23 non-native trees. So it's a 2-to-1.
So Paul, we had a brief conversation about sizing in terms of availability for these. You know, Acer Negundo, you're probably getting a 10-gallon container. I don't think you're getting a shagbark hickory, almost impossible unless you get, you know, native stock. But if you give me this list in Excel, I'll put my notes in there in terms of what I think is commercially available in size.
All right, I
The
sent this to
15 gallons is
everybody
not
the
gonna
other
be-
day in a PDF. I'll send it out in Excel. And yeah, if there's something that you guys want to make comments on, make the comments. And then once I get them, I'll send it to purchasing. But the next step would be basically to put it on the street for the RFP to get the prices, if this is what we want to include.
Yeah, what I'm saying is I put a size on there that's realistic that they can actually probably get.
Okay,
Hey, Paul,
yep.
you know, when we've distilled this down, one of the last products that I think you've managed is you put together a book that is helpful to introduce tree options to the residents, to public, right?
Yes, the guidebook for volunteers.
Yeah, I call it a tree force book. Any rate, this could be a huge book. And I'm just wondering if when we do this, we might put the ones that are most popular or the ones that we recommend as being most appropriate, recognizing that a lot more are available. I don't know. I think we should relook at the how we do this book and what its utility is moving forward to.
Well, one of the
garner
goals
support.
with this list now is to get more native species.
Yes.
And we've added more native species
great.
to it. So I kind
Right.
of need some guidance on how you want to go. Do you want more native species in it and the guidebook would come off of that? Or do you want to just water it down and have less to offer and then go accordingly with the guidebook? So I kind of
Right.
need to know what the committee wants to do.
Andrew's right. I think that's Andrew's point, and I agree with it. And I'd love to hear what other people have to say. But our goal is to, yes, include more pollinator-friendly native species, but it's not to give people an overwhelming choice of 500 trees. So I agree with Andrew. I think Peter has offered graciously to cull the list based on his expertise. And so he can probably knock a bunch of stuff off that he knows is not readily available or will never be available commercially in a 3-inch caliper,
You might-
That would be great. That
right?
would be awesome.
Right. So let
And then I
Peter
think
do
a few of
that.
us should sit down and go through the list and say, okay, here's our top 20 that
Mhm.
that meet costs, availability, native, and pollinator.
Yes.
And that would be the top 20. And those are the ones that we present forward to
Agreed.
residents when we're presenting options.
Okay,
Agreed.
I've got a question for the
Agreed.
committee.
Mhm.
Do you guys want to see the final list in another month? Or can we do that offline and go with the final product at that point? Because what I want to do is we want to get this RFP out on the street because we're going to have to interview the firms and then get a contract. And I'm trying to do it so that we have a contract in place for our fall planting. So what would your
I think you
preference be?
answered the question. I think you
Yeah,
answered your own
offline.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good, we'll do it offline, then everybody's okay with that.
Good.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Peter, thank you for offering to do that.
We'll talk, Peter.
I'm sure we will.
Great. Okay, Lisa, you are up with some of the main points for the Tree Planet Planning Summit meeting.
Exactly. So I listened to your meeting last week and, or last month, and I noticed that you guys were wondering if anybody took notes, and I did. I took some notes, and here are some of the takeaways that I think that we agreed to that day. And then I also want to share with some things that we're working with City Hall, as they say, on other things. I think some of the low-hanging fruit ideas that we had was to add to the dashboard, maybe the GIS that Paul's been working on. So Louise and Paul have been working together. Louise was able to find in one of the grants that we got, the $20,000 grant we got, we were able to convince the Nature Conservancy to let us use $2,500 to give an intern to the city to do GIS tracking. So this student is working with Paul and right now going around mapping the trees that TAC has put in to date. So hopefully that'll be a helpful thing. And it'll be making the GIS map that we're going to put on the dashboard. I think we all agree it'd be a great idea to put that map on the dashboard even more robust than it is right now. And then as between TAC and the city, Chris Torrey was kind enough to agree that maybe he would make either a monthly or quarterly report to TAC where he would talk about how many city trees are added, just as Paul did today. Maybe Paul does that part of it. And one of the things that we thought we should do is get a little bit more granular in how we share this because people are interested. So we want to know like how many trees are added. What's the variety? Where were they placed? What's the size, caliper? And then there was a large and robust discussion about native versus non-native. And the conservationists at the meeting pretty much made the point that the ideal ratio between native and non-native for supporting bees, birds, and other wildlife is 70-30. So going kind of back to the list that you guys were speaking about, yeah, when you put together this book, think about it in terms of when we put in trees over the course of the city in a year, we really want the balance to be 70-30, 70% native, 30% non-native. And then Chris was also going to, he kindly offered to tell us how many trees are removed on a quarterly basis as well. What varieties were taken, where were they, what number, why they were removed. Was it Eversource? Was it another reason? And then size and age of the trees that we're losing. And then also, who are we going about and replacing them? It was an interesting thing. One of the things that kind of came out of this when I did some research is in Hartford, I've shared this number with Paul, 50% of the canopy in Hartford is supplied by 10% of the trees. So every time you take an old tree out, you're really it's a devastating situation for the overall canopy. So we really want to get a sense of what came out of the planning meeting was a sense of how many we're adding, how many we're losing. Are we getting ahead of this? Maybe one of the reasons why our canopy is lower is because we really haven't been in a strong and robust replacement program. So getting a sense of really what the deficit or hopefully we're planting more than we're taking would be a good thing to do. So that was like the low hanging fruit that I think that we all agreed that we were going to be able to do. The common council members who attended, there was general agreement that we're going to begin working on a tree ordinance, and we've asked Chris Torrey and Alexis Chirichetti to help us with that. Chris had some really good ideas about adding maybe some further bonding for people who are doing development to make sure that trucks and equipment aren't put on tree roots and we lose trees. So there's things that we can maybe put through ordinances or through planning and zoning regulations. Another place which we really have to work with the city on that. Replacement might also be addressed by the tree ordinance removal policies. And then the conservation groups also had some contributions that they agreed to do. It seems like NTA is probably the best place to gather volunteers to do the liaison program, which you began to speak about. It's not a new program for Norwalk at all. Paul will tell you that we had liaisons years before, but the idea is to re-establish that program so that when there are, sorry, my computer's buzzing. When there are situations in the city where we know that Chris Torrey has some trees that are on his list, maybe for removal. Maybe we first reach out to the tree liaison and talk it through with the neighbors before putting the red slips on it, so that if there are misunderstandings or concerns about the trees, they can be addressed before we get into a contentious situation. So that seems like a good idea. The conservation groups also are very happy to start really robust education programs. We really want people in Norwalk to know why we think trees are so important, what are the benefits. Everybody on this committee knows very well why trees are so important, but not everybody knows how much water trees drink up and how much they reduce the heat in certain neighborhoods and things like that. Really important. Some other things that the conservation groups are interested in doing and helping and fundraising around is more extensive tree inventories. You really don't know what your canopy is until you count. And so there are grants out there. We were on a call the other day. Paul was on it. I think Anthony and Ken were also on it, where we're finding out that DEEP and also UConn have some pretty good grants that are coming up that might really support getting good tree inventories. And it would be a good thing for us to know. And tree inventories go beyond just counting the trees. We need to know what the varieties are, what their ages are. Just as I said, Hartford has a situation where 50% of the canopy is done by 10% of the trees. So it's really important to have a good sense of your inventory. And then it's almost like any diminishing asset, right? You need to replace what you're removing, and there's need for both. So that's a thought. And also some of the conservation groups are talking about doing some pilot programs for Friends of Parks. And we'll start it on a small basis. Maybe there'll be Friends of Oyster Shell Park. There's already terrific number of volunteers and some fundraising that's been gone around that. And maybe we can figure out ways where there can be a partnership between the city and volunteers for both doing some stewardship and then some fundraising, because we don't have endless amount of money that we can put into our parks, and we wish we did. And then the last little bit are some of the higher level goals. Back to the goal setting about the tree canopy. This is something we really need to work with the mayor's office from top to bottom. We won't have, we really can't figure out what our canopy goals are if we don't know what our canopy is. But thinking a long-term terms about that, what should Norwalk's goal be for its tree canopy percentage? And then also commitments from DPW and TAC and others groups for the native, non-native split of new additions being put in. And then tree list was on my list, and Paul addressed that, really getting together a really extensive, but not too extensive, but a good list of trees that should be placed. And as Paul always says, he wants the right tree put in the right place. So thinking about that. There's some other things that were mentioned that day were maybe a climate change office at the city level. Maybe that should be a cabinet position, something for the mayor to consider. The planning and zoning regulations are being written right now. There seems to be pretty much agreement on Common Council that there ought to be a lot more green initiatives that are baked into the planning and zoning regulations. So something else to consider. And then finally, maybe some pilot watering programs. Olmsted has their way of doing things for watering. Maybe we use some grant money and see if there is some other ways to do it that are just as successful. So those were, that's a compendium of my notes from that day. If anybody remembers anything differently or wants to share things that they remembered that I hadn't listed, I'd love to be reminded.
Yeah, no, that's great. Paul, can you just tell us right now what information you're having the intern put into the GIS mapping, just to see if that overlaps with some of the things that Lisa just mentioned?
Yes, matter of fact, if you'd like, I can do a share screen with you.
Okay, sure.
And you can take a look and see. Let me just. This is what the new system looks like. Basically, right now, we've collected to date 107 trees in the new system. And one of the dashboards up here, you can see what we're having them collect is all of the information related to the type of tree planted, the date that it was planted. If they're going out and looking at something that was several years ago, because remember, we're going to do 900 just in the tack trees alone. There's 915 from 2005 to today. So we're having them get the diameter at breast height. We just had that field added. IT did it yesterday for us. We were communicating even though City Hall was closed, and they're adding that. So you've got your location, street address, who planted the tree, the type of tree, the date that it was planted, as well as the diameter at breast height. And then there's another note field in case there's anything special that the person collecting it would like to note.
I think that's great. Lisa,
Yeah.
offhand, can you see if there's anything that you mentioned on your list that was not just mentioned? I mean, because we may as well discuss this now, because if we're doing this GISing now, it makes sense if we need to add something.
Yeah, I think
Hey,
that's great.
hey,
One of
Erica.
the things that's not listed is whether it's a native or non-native. Not everybody knows if they look at a tree, you know, if they like red maple, is that a native or non-native? People who are looking at it might not know. So getting an account and keeping account, I mean, I know you know whether it's not native or native or not, but it would be great to have that
I
information.
can probably have that coded in IT so that it relates to the list, and the person doing the actual field location with their cell phone doesn't have to scroll through and put that in. But here's a sample of just the tree over here, and this is over in Andrew's neighborhood.
Yeah,
There was a date planted, is a blood good London plane tree. It was 10/19/2020. It was planted by the Tree Advisory Committee, DPW. Address was, once again, it's 10 Cavray Road, and you can see the picture of the tree.
And then
Right.
capture the size of the tree. I mean, did you say that there's
He
a,
didn't have that in there yet when he did this location, but now that's been added since we met at that meeting on Friday. We've had him add that. So he's gonna have to go back and add it to some of them.
Hey, Paul,
Yep.
Chris wanted to say something?
I'm sorry for interrupting, but is this a list that's also in CityWorks or not?
It's all in our GIS, so we will have access to it through anything we can get to from our GIS. So yes, CityWorks would be able to get to it.
Yeah, the point I'm trying to make though is that CityWorks captures any maintenance that we've done on a tree. And I'll give you a for instance, someone calls up and says, hey, the tree in my house, in front of my house doesn't look good. CityWorks at least tracks, hey, DPW or the tree warden came out, looked at the tree. And a lot of times we look at that tree every year after. So typically a tree, someone says, I want to take it down. We say, hey, it's going to decline. It's in decline, but it's not ready to come down yet. So I think that history of what we do, that we don't take trees down immediately, we do wait. It is our goal
That's
not to
fantastic.
take trees down.
Chris, that's
Joyce-
fantastic. That's one of the very things that Danica wanted us to do, and we weren't sure if we could push them together. So that's fantastic to know that we can actually add that. That's really important, she thought.
Yeah,
Joyce
no,
has
that,
told me-
that's very important to this operation. We need to be
Yes.
able to see what we're doing and what maintenance or how we treated the tree.
And to that point,
pruning.
Chris, to that point,
Joyce has told me that we'll be able to link the two together because everything we've done, we're going through IT. And I've mentioned that all eventually is going to have to be pulled into one. And she said it could be done.
Okay, great.
So Chris, if you could provide criteria that Paul needs to add to the information, because my question is, what's the purpose of the list? And fundamentally, keeping a track of the history of the health of the tree is one thing. The number and species of the tree canopy in the city is another. But what are the other real reasons to do this other than just a list? It's a laundry list.
Peter-
It's just part of collecting the information, knowing what you're trying to gather.
So Peter, one of the things that can happen so we capture data of all of the trees that we look at and all of the trees that we remove
Hmm.
every month. So for the Public Works Committee meeting, Anthony has a list provided by DPW of all of the trees, whether it be in a park, the address, the species, why we took it down. So if we can just expand upon that, expand
Yes.
upon what we already do to help you guys. And every tree we take down, and I can tell you this, we take down more trees than we plant. So we need a better planting budget if we're going to keep pace to restore our tree canopy. So and that's a council thing, that's a mayor thing, I get it. And if we have to, we will advocate in front of the council so they get the message too.
It's not atypical citywide.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic, Chris, because that's exactly why we're asking for that data, right? Because we know we're losing this battle, right? And so the only way that we can make it clear to everybody, or one of the most dramatic ways we can make it clear to everybody, is to let people know what the deficit is. But it's like managing Peter, it's like managing any diminishing asset, right? Like the trees are going to live a certain period of time anyway. We should always be planting with the idea that some of our canopy is aging out and some of our canopy needs to age in. So that's the reason for the list. And from everything we're being told from people like Hartford and New Haven that have really robust tree canopy programs, you've got to do inventories like this. And also just what Chris said, keeping track of the management of them and realizing that this tree's declining, you might have 5 more years, you need to start planting, and we got to get ahead of it. So
Successional replacement, absolutely.
everybody tells us that the lists are absolutely key.
And this right now is one piece, because in the overall, what we're trying to do with this program is we know where we need trees. We know we need them in South Norwalk, where there's a lot of impervious area, East Norwalk, up in through the Main Street area. So that we already know. We collect everything that we've planted to date between the TAC, between Parks and Rec, the volunteer organizations. That'll all get put in here too. And then we can link it to the maintenance part of the city works. That'll get put in here. And then when somebody comes along and says, well, I know where I need 25 trees, those will get put in here also. And the whole thing will overlap so that we can start getting stuff being removed, getting where we need to do more plantings, and they could actually go in and people want them, as well as what we've already done. So this is the base section, but we're going to be doing the inventory for a little bit. And if we can get more resources to do that inventory in terms of interns to go do it, please, like we said to Louise, if you can give me a couple of interns, we can do it faster. Right now, we just got this program up, and this is the new one that we said has the dashboard, has everything that the old one didn't. But we've already collected 107 trees, and tomorrow Imran Sahid is his name, is the intern. He'll be in tomorrow all day, and he's got a list of what he's already got to do. So he's on his way, and you can see some of the product of it already.
So can we add the new developments in the city that are already?
That can all,
on their
when we
planting
start to do those, when they have a plan that P and Z requires them to do plantings, then that can be added when they say they do the zoning inspections. The same program can get used to track those trees and put them in and start to build the whole package together between private developers plantings, like down on Raymond and Day. There was 70 trees that they put in down there a year or two ago.
And that's all on paperwork. And then when they top them, we can have some big argument.
Well, yeah, that's another whole
Yeah,
issue.
That's got to stop.
And let's
This-
Similar
this
to
is where we're
similar to
headed, and you
Waypoint, Peter, similar to Waypoint.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Avalon.
Yes, no, exactly. So once it's registered in the city, my point is they're on the windscreen. They're recognizing that the city is taking care of their trees.
And maybe
Let's
what
say-
we can do is require that the trees be geolocated as part of their as-built drawing for the development.
Well, development,
Love it.
you have plans which are pretty good, but yeah.
So
You know
that's
what,
where
you-
we're headed with this whole thing, and you can see some of the results already.
Right,
Paul, one of the things too that we need to do a little better of a job, and what you did to create the platform to link everything is fantastic. So let me give you 100% credit for that, because that is the foundation of the rest of what we do for the trees. But one of the things that we need to do when we plant trees, and Paul, you know, Collins Funeral Home, he wanted a tree in
Yes.
front of his business. We planted a tree in front of his business, and then he took it down. So we need to make a little bit more of a rock solid agreement or contract with private residences, whether it be a business or a homeowner, that when we plant a tree on your property, you can't just take it down because it's blocking your sign after 10 years.
There has to be accountability and we have to have
Definitely.
that built in.
I
I
agree.
was so annoyed when we saw that, but let's just say it's there was not much that I was told that we could do about it. And that
Well,
was
we,
kinda-
on Collins, we planted at least 3 trees there. I don't know how many, but it was much more, it was more than
Quite a
one.
few, quite a few. but
Also,
Believe me, I would have liked to have seen them
Yeah.
punished for what they did too, but
Well, that was 2
No, but
years
what
ago.
Chris is
That was
saying
2
is that
years
we
ago.
have something built into the agreement ahead of time so that when this happens, there is accountability and we have some kind of a legal or financial leg to stand on because it was part of the agreement, not something that we get annoyed about after, but that there's some forethought there and it's built in. So let's
It was built in.
definitely,
It was built in. There
yeah, it
wasn't
was
a tree.
because the agreement says
No,
that
the
you're not
agreement's-
supposed to cut or remove
so
that tree without the
if it
permission of the
was-
tree city.
If it was built in, we need to do a better job where we can enforce it
enforcing.
even better.
Exactly.
That's the key to the thing is the enforcement and the will to do it.
No. So we need to have like our law department draft agreements before we just
Agreed.
say, agree, so that's rock solid, that we can take them to court when they take down a tree. Like, we need to, honestly, I think we need to take the gloves off with some people
Mhm.
and show them that the environment and that trees are important and that we are trying to restore our tree canopy. And that, we're gonna strictly enforce it.
Or if they take down a tree, they have to pay for trees to be added somewhere else. It's not that a 1-for-1, as you know, Chris. We've
No,
talked.
it's
All right,
it's
all right,
honestly,
all right.
in my opinion, it should be a 5-to-1. Like the city
right,
of
it's-
Norwalk it should be a 5 trees to 1 tree.
It's very rare that homeowners take down a tree. If they're guilty of anything, it's that they radically prune it to make a lollipop. That, I've seen that and I've discussed that with residents, but that's extremely rare. Also, Paul, we're going to integrate the Norwalk Tree Alliance's contribution, and they have continued to not only plant trees, but plant more trees. That should be
Yes.
part of this. as well.
Yes, what we're doing right
you
now
have
is
all
we're
that
trying to get the
information.
biggest list. And right now, Public Works TAC had 915. There's probably another couple hundred between Parks and Rec. And the Tree Alliance, Alan and them have already sent me their list of what they've done in the last
About
year or two.
75 now.
Louise has given me her list. And then I'll ask Lisa, do you guys have anything from the Land Trust?
Yeah, we've been adding some things, not as robust as you guys. We're more about stewardship than adding trees, but we did just add 10 chestnuts somewhere. I can give you a list of a few.
Yeah, if you can feed us that list, we'll have that put in too.
Okay, I'll ask them.
That's great, guys. I want to move on to the next agenda
Okay.
item.
Okay.
The grant applications. There's very little that needs to be said about this. I already mentioned 15 Madison. I guess there was the address I couldn't remember. So there's that grant we did not get, but we will continue to work with TAC and with Lisa on trying to get some of those trees in that we planned. Ludlow Park, oh, Paul's already sharing a screen. So on June 1st, we had a group go out over to Ludlow Park and we planted 4 trees, Paul?
Yes,
Four
three by
trees.
the Public Works TAC and 1 by Rexon Park.
Right, so it was not a matching grant, but the National Environmental Education Foundation provided funds for us to put something in a park, and we worked very closely with Rec and Parks in order to beef that up, and they matched for us, and so we were able to get 4 trees in, and on order are 2 maintenance-free benches. Those benches are quite expensive, and we have 2 of those on order. And so on June 1st, we put the trees in, and we had quite a few volunteers. You can scroll through, Paul. There are like 3 different pictures there. Neighbors, people who frequent the park, And I am obviously a professional educator, so no tree planting or any program escapes an educational component when I am around. And we had some really, really positive feedback from that. Paul, do you want to talk about the Oak Hills Eversource?
Okay, I'm gonna stop. What we're doing now, and just so that everybody's aware, we've received just the other day, planting plan for Oak Hills that they had promised to give us for the trees that they had taken down and mentioned that they would do it back at Arbor Day. I sent the members of the committee the proposed plan. And basically what this is gonna be is the introduction tonight. And we are not asking the committee members to make any kind of recommendation or anything on the spot tonight, seeing it. We want to give you guys a month to review it. So next month, this item will be on the agenda again, and then you can make any comments. Staff, well, just briefly looking at what we saw, staff basically, I'd like to see some trees put in with what they did. They could probably do a little bit better. I'll share with you right now on the screen what they had proposed and the map that they did.
Well, as part of that, what is the height limitation that they're asking us to stay to under the wires?
They're saying they want us to stay to 15 feet. And right now, what they are saying that they would do is they would do viburnums, and you can see there's 110 and 115, which are basically shrubs. I'd like to see, even if they could do some stuff on the sides, maybe, and I know this is a golf course in this area here, so we got to be a little careful, but I'd like to see if maybe they could put some other trees in and then maybe do the understory shrubs as well. That would be staff recommendation right now, but I want to hear what the committee has to say. And then I will also be meeting with Audrey from the Oak Hills Authority, like we had said we would do. Over the course of the next month, I'll meet with her, walk it with her, review the plan, and then next month she can make her comment related to it. We'll get the comments from feedback from the committee and then staff, and we'll put it all together and send it off to Eversource for the beginning
Okay,
of August.
Paul, so if you want to report on this on Tuesday, July 27th, which is our next meeting, when do you need people to respond to you by? Do you want 1 week before the meeting?
Yeah, when we ask for the agenda to be submitted the Wednesday before the meeting,
So
I'd like
you
to have-
want, okay, so then let's say July 20th. You're going to email this document to everyone.
you've already got it.
Okay, and then can you do a follow-up email and say comments by July 20th so that they can be included on the agenda and discussed on the meeting on the 27th? You know,
Yes.
we all have to have a cutoff date.
Yes, okay, I will do that. And then what we want to do is we want to try to get it back to Eversource because they really can't plant in August anyway, but I'd like them to be ready to go in the middle of September so that they can do
Sure,
it in the fall.
Sure. Nope, that makes perfect sense. Okay, I want to move on so we can give Alan the opportunity to speak about the NTA.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. It's so great to listen to everything that's been said so far. Quickly reporting on our activities, we did receive our check from Eversource, the grant that we applied for from Paul's suggestion. So that was great news. We also received renewals on our grants from the 6th taxing district and the 3rd taxing district for previous grants that they'd given us. They gave us another year's worth of grant money that we could use for planting in their districts. Wanted to report on a few activities that we've done. Our educational team put together the first ever bonsai tree event that we held at Fodor Farm. It was wildly successful. We had 10 people there who signed up to create their own bonsai. And it's part of our education program in the sense that we're looking for ways to bring trees to people that might otherwise not think about or be interested in talking about trees. And so bonsai was a way to bring in another group of people, tell them who the No Rock Tree Alliance is. And from that meeting, we had 2 people who expressed interest in serving on our board. So from that standpoint alone, it was a success. I wanted to recap our tree planting events from this year to give you all a summary of what we worked on. We did not do as much planting last year because of the pandemic, so we really dialed things up this year. And tomorrow we have 2 more trees going in on Belden, 2 red oaks in front of People's Bank, which will bring us to 78 trees total. There's one, I know your count was 75, Paul. There's one that I just found out about that was missing that I'll send to you. To quickly
Okay.
summarize where these all went, we had 28 trees that were planted for the 3rd taxing district, a mix of species, maple, oak, dogwood. We had 7 trees planted at Van Zant that were redbuds, 13 redbuds on McKinley. We had 1 red maple on Rowayton Avenue. And by the way, don't take notes. I'll send you all of this. We had 8 on Heron red maples. We had 4 trees at Elder House in Central Norwalk, 3 serviceberry and 1 dogwood. We had 5 dogwoods planted at First Congregational Church. We had 6 pin oaks planted at the Triangle Community Center parking lot. We had 1 sugar maple on Richley. We had 2 dogwoods and 1 serviceberry at the hospital, Norwalk Hospital. And then we'll have these 2 red oaks that are being planted tomorrow. So by all accounts, a very outstanding year. We had excellent fundraising activities that allowed us to do this, but this was obviously a huge portion of our budget. This is more than we've ever spent on trees. And so we're going to now have to continue to push for more fundraising as we come into the fall and again for next year. But we're very proud of that work. 19 of those trees were planted by volunteers, which is awesome. That's one of our goals, was to have a portion of our trees be planted by volunteers so that we can defray the cost of planting and have more trees going in the ground. Planning for fall plantings. So as a group, we're talking about getting our lists together for where we'd like to see plantings happening this fall. And I'd like to coordinate with your advisory group on that so that we have a well-coordinated map of what we'd like to do for the fall. One opportunity that's recently come our way from the Norwalk Land Trust is a field on one of their properties has a number of native saplings that they will need to take out for a pollinator meadow that they're going to be installing. So I'll be having a conversation with Mary Verrill about potentially transplanting those saplings and growing them up to be trees that are of a reasonable size that we could put them elsewhere throughout Norwalk, which is a neat project that we're going to look at. A number of other things are upcoming for the Tree Alliance, but just wanted to give you that 5-minute summary of what we've been working on. I'll open it up for any questions that you have.
That's
Hey, Alan,
fantastic.
I'm sorry, this is Chris, and if you ever just need the conversation of your meetings for me to attend, I'm certainly willing, of course, to talk about where you and I have talked about planting locations in the past. I think the schools would be a great start to get some trees planted. And it's the city of Norwalk property, and I think that we should look to our own property first as easy locations to plant some trees. And then maybe people see those trees planted and say, hey, I want my neighborhood to look like that. Because because there's not a homeowner that I know that wouldn't love that a tree-lined street raises your property value by 15 to 20% immediately. That's the message that we need your group, our group, the city to be saying, because that's what people get. Oh, my house could be worth more? Of course I want trees. I don't like trees, but if my house is gonna be worth more, if I have trees there, then I want them.
Great, I love it.
Green
I love it. You know
equals
what,
green.
Good for you, Chris.
Chris, I'm gonna add your email to our board group that goes out so you can know when our meetings are and if you're able to attend them. We are having our first in-person meeting after having Zoom forever this Thursday at 6 p.m. It's very short notice, but if you're able to attend, join us.
I'm available and I certainly will attend, Alan. And I don't have a problem sharing with your group, and to Lisa's point earlier, to the tree advisory committee, of all of the trees and the locations that we've taken down and the species. So you know, like the trees that we take down are a necessity. There's nothing I can do about it. Most of the time is they need to come down, but I think every group needs to know the species and the location so we can plan. Like that's how we're going to plan is what we're doing. Proactive.
Great, Chris. That would be so helpful for all of our conservation groups, because we really, I think that if we can make people aware that we're running at a deficit, we can bring a lot of attention to this and start getting people to be more excited about even putting trees on your property, just as you said. That would be so helpful.
Right. That's how we're going to do it, is to show people the advantage, not just the handful of environmentalists and tree huggers out there, We need to show them why we're doing it, that it helps them too.
Well, Chris,
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
for discussion, part of that removal is about getting invasive species out. So if you're telling me that you're looking at a Norway maple, I'm telling you, take it out. And if I'm doing a construction project and you're doing invasive species removal from new planting, and there are 3 Norway maples 2 feet away, I'm saying take them out. So Lisa, I don't know how the conservation groups see this as a progressive sort of reinstatement of the native species by eliminating the native species versus the invasive species. Because
Yeah,
when we
that's a
work
tricky
city,
thing.
I believe what was taken out at Oakwood were Norway spruce.
well, excuse me,
exactly that, yeah.
I'm looking at the Norwalk River Trail and I see a ton of Norway maple
Mhm.
that probably could have come out for another $10,000, $15,000 with the work. And, you know, from a landscape architect's perspective, that's a great opportunity to replant with native species. But now it's going to cost more to take them out under other volunteer funds if we don't have money.
Well, it's such a tricky thing, right? Because then you're still depleting the canopy, and there's other things that trees do, even if they're not native, which is why the 70-30 kind of works, right? Because the 70-30, I mean, you guys are the experts, but the 30% are still drinking up water, they're throwing shade, they're sequestering carbon. So even though they're not feeding the species, that 30% is doing something good, right? So that's why there's a
fair
balance.
discussion. We'll talk more, but the issue is you replant. So.
Right, but you can't replant something that's as old as what you're removing, right, Peter? That's what the concern is like you're taking out a
If it's a
30-year
Norway
old
maple,
tree.
don't care. because it's preventing the other native species from grabbing hold. But
Yeah.
we'll talk more. We'll talk offline.
One of the things too is being that we're on the discussion is if a tree is dead, but it's in the woods, and when it falls, it's going to fall into the woods. It's a different that is a different tree than a dead tree that's in front of someone's property, and the target is their kid's swing set, right? So we need to look at this from a holistic view, not just from a tree hugger or an environmental group, but from a city group. And honestly, I don't think that we have a clear message from the city representatives of what is a liability and what are we going to accept as a liability in the future. So yeah, we know this tree is in decline. Do we take it down because we know it's in decline, or do we leave it up because it's a home to squirrels and a home to raccoons and there's understory and there's all of that. So but we need some clear guidance from the council and from the mayor's office on where we stand as a city. Are we okay with a little bit of liability? Do we not want any liability? It's just, it's a discussion that has to be had moving forward, and I think it should be had sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I
To
mean,
Chris's
certainly if you
point-
took every tree out, there's no liability, right? So that can't be the answer. So there has to be some risk always, right? And there's some trees that look healthy and they come down because something else happens weird, a weird wind shear. So I agree.
And you do need to have it.
But Lisa, once we get all on that same page, I think that we
Yes.
are going to move forward so fast and so well, because we're all working under the same rules and the same thought process. And it's a city thought process. It's not Chris Torrey's, it's Paul Sotnick's or Lisa Shanahan's. It's our approach to how we as a community, Greenwich does it. So it is possible. We need to.
New Haven does it. You're absolutely right. Other cities have done this. And I think it'd be great to invite some of these municipalities in to hear how they calculated these risks. That'd be great. I'd love
To Chris's point too, this will help us do our jobs a lot easier too, so that we know a clear and cut direction of where we should and shouldn't go. So it'll really help all of us.
Agreed. Definitely fodder for further discussions. I'm going to move on to other business. I would like to thank Peter for agreeing to remain on TAC. Your expertise has been very instrumental, and I really appreciate you staying on and dealing with this bunch.
You have to deal with me.
And I'd also like to take this opportunity to give Andrew a Zoom hug. And thank you for all of the tireless work you've done, planting trees around town, working with people, working with business owners, working with homeowners, being the liaison between the TAC and an NTA prior to Alan. And just, we wish you well in your next chapter of life. Congratulations on the sale of your home. We're going to miss you horribly, and thank you so much.
And
Well,
and Andrew, thank you.
guys. It's been good.
Andrew's probably responsible for 150, maybe 200 trees over the last 5-6 years as he's been on the committee. And it's funny because it all started out of a service call.
Oh,
We went to
no.
a service call, Jose and Ortiz and I went to a service call on Cavray Road about a tree that needed to be looked at. And we saw Andrew's yard, and people have heard this story before too. And his yard looks like an arboretum for anybody that hasn't seen it. And we said, this looks like a real good guy to grab. Let's talk to him about getting on the tree advisory committee.
And the rest is history, as they say.
That's his history.
Hi, beautiful person.
No, thank you, Andrew. We're gonna miss you, and we'll probably stop by and see you in Florida at some point.
I
Yeah,
look
we all have
forward
an
to
open
that.
invitation, just saying.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. If I ever find a home down there.
Well,
Thanks very much, guys.
I move to adjourn.
I second it.
Andrew seconds it. Have a great night, everyone.
1 minute, Liz,
Have a
Paul.
good night. Night all.
Take care.
Thank you guys very much. Honor serving with you.